evidence overnight that Donald Trump is being played for a fool again by one of the world's most vicious leaders and biggest liars, Russian President Vladimir Putin. Now, the US president has been boasting that his meeting with Putin in Alaska last Friday and his phone call on Monday had got a breakthrough. His spokesman announced the big news.
President Trump spoke with President Putin by phone, and he agreed to begin the next phase of the peace process, a meeting between President Putin and President Zelensky. Now there may finally be light at the end of the tunnel.
And this meeting, we're told, could happen in as soon as 2 weeks. Well, I'd love to believe it, but as I said last night, odds are Putin's not going to show. He'll keep stalling to give him time to keep attacking Ukrainian civilians and take more territory. I mean, the history tells us this is what he does. For a start, Putin saying, oh, I could meet Zelensky is not new. He's offered Trump this same bait for months, and Trump's taken it each time to get Trump to delay more sanctions while Russia, meanwhile, attacks Ukraine. In April, Putin had already suggested Russia was open to direct talks with Ukraine as he kept up his strikes. In May, he conned Trump again into saying ceasefire negotiations between just Russia and Ukraine would start immediately. In June, Putin said he was willing to meet with Ukraine's Volodymyr Zelensky. He's been saying the same thing for months and never delivering, and here we go again. Last night, Putin's foreign minister said, oh, not so fast with this supposed meeting between Zelensky and Putin that Trump's talking about. A lot of hoops to jump through first.
Step by step, gradually, starting from the expert level and further, going through all the necessary stages to prepare summits.
Joining me is Donald Trump's first White House spokesman, Sean Spicer. Sean Spicer, always great to see you. Sean, we now have the Russian foreign minister saying about the supposed peace talks between the Russian and Ukrainian leaders, well, you know, this first has to go through all these experts. We've got to be very careful, go through various layers, maybe include the United Nations. Vladimir Putin's actually talked for months about being open to talks and always stalled. If he's stalling yet again, what do you think Donald Trump will do?
It's a really interesting question you're asking, Andrew, because I'm of the mind that Putin actually doesn't want peace. I think Donald Trump has done everything to get us to a place where peace is possible. He had the meeting in Alaska. He had the meeting with Zelensky. He had the meeting with these European leaders. But here's the deal, and this is to the point of your question. If he gets to this point where he obfuscates and creates an issue with the time or the place, or we should have deputies meet first, I think Donald Trump has worn out Putin's welcome, meaning that he will ratchet on the sanctions, the secondary sanctions, the end of the phantom fleet that has allowed Russian oil to flow out of the country. So I think he's going to allow his patience to wear out real quick. Putin's got to recognize that Trump really wants peace, that he has given him an opportunity to allow this to happen. And if he doesn't want to take it, that's fine. But that Trump isn't going to sit back and be taken for a fool. And he will ratchet up the sanctions, the secondary sanctions, et cetera. You know, as has been said before, the bottom line is the U.S. has been at like a 3 when it comes to enforcing these sanctions. We've turned a blind eye to a lot of the things that have allowed Russia to do. And I think that Trump is ready to turn the volume up.
You know, Sean, I tend to agree with you completely. I think Putin has been playing Donald Trump for a fool, and I very much regret that Donald Trump didn't follow through with his threat, well, as of, a week ago, to impose sanctions if the meeting on last Friday didn't result in peace. But I'm wondering, the process you're talking about, the stiffening of Trump's resolve, the switch from thinking, oh, look, Trump, Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin, we're mates and all this kind of thing, and we can get something done. How much do you think is due to Melania Trump? Now, she knows what it is to live under, dictatorial rule. She grew up under communism. She sent Vladimir Putin an emotional letter last Friday, the very day that Putin met her husband in Alaska, telling him to think of the children in this war, telling him he could end their suffering with just a stroke of the pen. And Ukraine's president on Monday at the White House passed on a letter to her, thanking her for thinking of the nearly 20,000 Ukrainian children that Putin has kidnapped. How influential do you think she has been in steering the president into gradually being tougher on Vladimir Putin?
It's such a great question you're asking, Andrew. I don't think people fully appreciate the power that Mrs. Trump has on President Trump's thinking. This didn't just come out of nowhere, right? It's one thing if it was a private letter. They made it very public for a reason. Mrs. Trump is moved by the killing of these children, the kidnapping of them. I mean, there's tens of thousands of them that have been taken from Ukraine into Russia. And it was made public for a reason. And I think that is to make sure that Putin understands that the one person who has more influence than anybody on Donald Trump, his wife, Melania, is very moved by this. And it's funny because the American media, you're the first person, Andrew, that has really picked up on the significance of this. And I know Mrs. Trump fairly well. I would just say that, like, no one should underestimate the power that she has on his decision making. And President Trump's display of that letter should speak volumes to what he was trying to convey to Vladimir Putin, which is, I want peace. I want the killing to end. He is so moved by the killing of children. And I saw this during my tenure in Syria when that was happening. And you've heard him talk about it in Gaza. And here we are again in Russia.
I think it was very clever of Zelensky to pick that up and
yeah, I will say that. That's the second piece of that, Andrew. That's the second piece. That Zelensky understood this meeting, the second meeting that Zelensky had. I know everybody got a kick out of the fact that he wore a suit, but Zelensky was picture perfect in this meeting. He understood. He said thank you a lot. And I know a lot of people mocked some of the imagery of it, the suit, the thank yous, but Zelensky got it. And the idea that he picked up on that Melania letter and said, here is my wife's letter to you, thanking your wife for doing this, was brilliant. And I just, again, sometimes people don't pick up on the imagery and the impact of some of these small things that happen in the meetings. And I'm glad that you've done that, Andrew, because it really did make a difference. And I know, I mean, I say this without actually having talked to the president, but I know that he walked back upstairs later that day and said to the First Lady, you're not going to believe what the First Lady of Ukraine, how she was moved by your letter. And so this is where sometimes the American media, in particular the international media, doesn't get it.
Sean, I want to pick up on something you just touched on there, the imagery. Well, the fawning of those 7 European leaders to Donald Trump, which was just amazing. And there's an equally amazing photograph from that meeting with these 7 European leaders on Monday that just shows not just the fawning, but Europe's weakness. The 7 of them sitting in front of Trump's desk, almost like errant school children or minions getting their orders. It shows that, well, I just wonder how sick Americans are really of having to bail out weak Europeans who can't even defend themselves and have to go crawling to the White House saying, please, 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 America, help us defend Ukraine.
So there's 2 things that I thought were interesting. One, how that picture differed from the first term. These guys all lectured him, told him how he was wrong, how he didn't understand the impact of his policies. So the contrast between term 1 and term 2 is unbelievable. And then last night I listened to NATO Secretary Mark Rutte go on television here in the United States and say Trump was right. The criticism that he was levying on NATO was correct. And his criticism of the fact that they wanted the protection of the United States, the Article 5 protections, but didn't want to match their commitment, which is part of the deal here, that they would have at that point 2% of their GDP towards their own national defenses. It was, to me, I loved it because when I listened to the Secretary General make those comments last night, I thought to myself, for all of you elitists and foreign policy experts that have been decrying President Trump's stance on Europe and NATO, you finally got it. Here is the NATO Secretary General himself saying Trump was right in his criticism.
He was absolutely right. And may I just add, Sean, that his administration is equally right in its criticism of Australia. Our failure to lift our defence to anything, even remotely like an adequate amount to pretend to defend ourselves. We've been warned, and I think America might.
But Andrew, here's the thing: why is it? You look at the AUKUS deal with Australia. You look at what we do with NATO. Why is it always these folks want to lecture the United States about what they should do, what it should do here in the United States, not what you got? And again, I'm not trying to be critical of Australia or the EU or any of its member states, but the bottom line is maybe you guys step up to the plate first, instead of criticizing the U.S. first. In Australia, you're closing up to China, and then you're criticizing the United States. It's like, hey, before you criticize the United States, when we're willing to give you submarines under AUKUS, stop cozying up to China.
Well, that is exactly the message coming from America. I endorse it 100%. And I think, the game's got to be over of the West, the rest of the West treating America's army like a mercenary army that's actually at their disposal. It's not. You've got to have a partnership, a genuine one. Sean Spicer, thank you very much for your time.
Always appreciate it, Andrew. Thank you.